Bernie Sanders attacks Hillary Clinton on the debate stage.
But I do question her judgment.
And hours later denounces greed during a visit to the Vatican. We'll take you from New York to Rome. IRS issues why some politicians want the agency leader kicked out. Heroin epidemic, the growing concern across the country. And Greece prepares for a papal visit. How the Pope's trip could change the debate over migration. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, April 15th, 2016. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We begin on the campaign trail, a Brooklyn brawl. Sarcasm, scoffing, and snideness on display at last night's Democratic debate. The tension between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders was higher than ever as the rivals faced off on the debate stage.
Let us talk about the worst foreign policy blunder in the modern history of this country.
The presidential candidates issuing some of their sharpest attacks yet.
I led the opposition to that war. Secretary Clinton voted for that war. Let's talk about judgment.
Clinton again declined Sanders' call for her to release transcripts of her paid speeches to Wall Street banks. Then she turned the tables.
Let's set and expect the same standard on tax returns. There is a long-standing expectation that everybody running release their tax returns.
Sanders said he would release his previous year's tax returns Friday. Clinton also hit Sanders on his signature issue, banking reform, pointing out his poor showing in a recent New York Daily News interview.
His core issue, breaking up the banks, when asked, he could not explain how that would be done.
Sanders pushed back, mocking Clinton's response to another issue important to his populist supporters, raising the minimum wage.
I have supported the fight for 15. I am proud to have the endorsement of most of the unions that have led the fight for 15.
I am sure a lot of people are very surprised to learn that you supported raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
After the debate, Sanders hopped on a plane to Rome to speak for 10 minutes at a Vatican conference. Our Rome producer, Mary Shovlain, joins us now. Mary, is the Vatican feeling the burn?
It definitely is, Lauren, and it's rare for us to be caught in this political firestorm, if you will, of the elections going on in the U.S. There were fans standing outside of the Vatican, said Rome feels the burn. And so he was a little bit late arriving, but once he got there, he gave his speech, and it sounded very Catholic in a way in terms of he was citing three different popes, Leo XIII, St. Pope John Paul II, and of course Francis, and he is a huge fan of Pope Francis.
What did Bernie say about this experience?
He came out and spoke to reporters just after he gave his speech, and he reiterated a lot of the points he made during his talk, which was, of course, that a lot of the wealth today is in the hands of the 1%. And he highlighted a lot of Catholic documents to back up his economic theories, and popes have been saying this all along, that we have to have a more equal distribution of wealth, an economy based on the common good. That is something he pointed out as well, not just one that seeks to increase one's own profit at the expense of the human person.
Many will see a great irony here since Bernie Sanders doesn't really agree with the church on major issues like abortion and marriage. Why was he invited?
Well, the Pontifical Academy for Social Sciences is almost famous for doing this. The guest lists on a lot of their conferences, not a lot of them line up directly with Catholic teaching, but listen, we've had popes opening the door to dialogue with a lot of different people who think differently on a lot of different topics. And we see this even in John Paul II, Benedict XVI. And with this specific conference, yes, they differ on many themes, especially marriage and life issues, but they've come together on the economy. And of course, it would be Pope Francis himself that would say, let's all sit down at the table, let's at least get the conversation going, and maybe hearts and minds will change.
Thank you so much, Mary Shovlain, our Rome producer. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Also attending the Vatican conference, Bolivia's President Evo Morales. He met with the Pope to talk about the socioeconomic situation of the country and social policy. He raised eyebrows by giving him a book on the medicinal properties of cocoa leaves. That's the raw material of cocaine. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Impeach the IRS Commissioner. That's the message from conservative lawmakers on the Friday before taxes are due. Jason Calvi joins us live from Capitol Hill. Jason.
Lauren, 5 Republicans took to the House floor to say it was time for impeachment. But is this just a publicity stunt during this election year? I asked the man behind the push, a member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus.
If you guys get out of kilter, Congress is going to hold you accountable because we have to do that.
Conservative complaints about the IRS center on how Commissioner John Koskinen handled the Lois Lerner controversy. She led the IRS division that deals with tax-exempt status applications. She admitted agents improperly singled out Tea Party applications for extra scrutiny.
422 backup tapes are destroyed containing potentially 24,000 emails. Many of those emails most likely were Lois Lerner emails that the American people, the Congress, will never get a chance to see.
Back in October, congressmen like Florida's Ron DeSantis backed a resolution to impeach the IRS commissioner, but the House leadership never gave it a hearing or a vote. So now, a fresh push as tax day nears.
You're about to file your taxes. Millions of Americans are going to file their tax. If the IRS audits you as a taxpayer and you say, you know what, the documents, I destroyed them, my bad. If you lied to them, if there were other things that you didn't do when they asked for it, you would never be able to get away with that.
Speaker Paul Ryan admits IRS changes are needed, but didn't give a yes when asked yesterday if he supported impeachment.
I think that the IRS is not being led well. I think the IRS misled Americans.
Speaker Ryan says the real key is fixing the tax code. Now, the White House says the commissioner is the man of the highest integrity. They also point to an independent inspector general who found no evidence of the destruction of evidence in this case. Lauren?
Jason, that happened in the fall. Why hasn't, though, the Republican majority moved forward with impeachment? Seems like it would be popular in election year.
Yeah, that's what I was asking myself. I was told that the real issue is Republicans fear a backlash if they go forward with impeachment.
Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan says his state will have the toughest lead testing rules in the nation under his new plan. And he says it would require the replacement of all underground lead service pipes. The proposal unveiled today would require utilities to test all schools, daycare centers, and nursing homes. Flint's water became contaminated last year when the city switched its drinking water source from Lake Huron to Flint River. Heroin and prescription drug addiction is a growing problem in the U.S. More than 15 million people abuse painkillers every year. Earlier this week, the House passed a bill to tackle the issue. Wyatt Goolsby joins us with what one state is doing. Wyatt.
Lauren, the chair of the Senate's Homeland Security Committee, says drug overdose is a serious problem for the country and for his home state of Wisconsin. Senator Ron Johnson says hard drugs like heroin continue to flood into the country through the southern border, and it's making its way across the country.
As the death toll rises, so does the concern over opioid abuse. Prescription painkillers like morphine and illegal narcotics such as heroin are now prominent in much of the Northeast. State officials in New York and Pennsylvania are collaborating to stop drug trafficking across state lines.
Heroin is everywhere, and it's cheap. And in some neighborhoods, it's cheaper and easier for children to get that heroin than it is for them to get a pack of cigarettes.
That's also true in Wisconsin. Tyler Liebert is a recovering heroin addict who turned his life around after a decade of drug abuse. He now speaks to students through a drug prevention and awareness program called Your Choice to Live.
When I was growing up, I knew what drugs were. I knew that they were bad, but I didn't understand the consequences. I didn't understand how it affected other people. And so when we share all that and we show kids, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting your family, and it affects your family more than it affects you, that sparks the light bulb.
Liebert is one of several panelists speaking to both Wisconsin senators this afternoon. He hopes the heroin epidemic will remain in the public's eye. His message to anyone suffering from addiction is that they always have a choice.
We will share our deepest, darkest, stories so that other people can, feel hope, and so that they can feel that they're not alone and that there is a light at the end of this tunnel.
Lawmakers will take input from today's hearing to Wisconsin, from Wisconsin to Washington, to address what other steps they can do to address this drug epidemic. And it's not just a problem in the United States, it's also true in Central America. The United Nations will hold a special session on the worldwide drug problem next week. Lauren.
Thank you, Wyatt. Another earthquake hit southern Japan today, along with a tsunami warning. 9 people are dead after yesterday's earthquake. The 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit this afternoon. Japan is one of the most seismically active areas in the world. Nearly 800 people were injured in yesterday's attack, 50 of them severely. An embarrassing setback for North Korea. The country failed to launch a mid-range missile to celebrate the birthday of the country's founder. It exploded a few seconds after liftoff. South Korea is on high alert. It says North Korea wants to build a missile capable of reaching U.S. military bases in Asia and the Pacific. More fallout from last month's terror attacks in Belgium. The country's transport minister just resigned over lapses in airport security and oversight. The March 22nd bombings at the airport and subway in Brussels killed 32 people. ISIS claimed responsibility. And Spain's acting industry minister resigned following the release of the so-called Panama Papers. He was scheduled to appear in front of Parliament in a few days. The papers linked several world leaders to offshore accounts. Questions swirl around Russian President Vladimir Putin and his friends who may have hid money on his behalf. British Prime Minister David Cameron and the presidents of Argentina and Ukraine are on the defensive. The Prime Minister of Iceland resigned after he was linked to money in offshore accounts. Well, joining me now is Gregory Korte, White House correspondent from USA Today, to talk about all of the latest political shenanigans that were happening in Washington this week. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's talk about last night's debate and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Gloves off, fiery, fierce, and then Bernie Sanders hopped a plane to Rome. What do you think about the tone of the election?
Well, it's certainly the Democratic side has really kicked it up a notch. We've heard this really sort of vehement rhetoric back and forth on the Republican side, not as much on the Democratic side. And I get the sense that there wasn't really anything new in terms of last night's debate, but the tone of it, maybe it's because it was in Brooklyn. Maybe it was, maybe
right.
it was an
It was a Brooklyn brawl, right?
Exactly.
Right. Well, I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that the Republican side has been so vociferous and feisty and fiery. Now, let's switch gears a little bit to Bernie Sanders and his trip to the Vatican. Do you feel like that politicians are maybe using the Pope to, or at least Bernie Sanders maybe using the Pope to further their likability here in the U.S.?
This is an extremely popular Pope, and we saw that in Washington, D.C. Last September when Pope Francis came here, the crowds he saw, and the reception that he got from a Congress, a joint session of Congress that can't agree on anything, but we're all trying to wrap themselves in the mantle of Pope Francis. What Bernie Sanders said at the Vatican today, he spoke at the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, wasn't anything different than what Bernie Sanders has said throughout the entire campaign, every day of this campaign. But it's getting new attention because he's pointing out that some of the things that he's saying on these economic justice issues, the disparities in wealth in the United States and around the globe, are the same things that Pope Francis is concerned about.
Last thing I want to talk to you about, it's a very strange conference call the White House had yesterday with members of the press about set-top boxes. What is happening with that?
It seems like an arcane issue. This is an issue before the Federal Communications Commission that would allow customers to not just rent their cable box from whoever their cable provider is, but buy it from any number of providers. And it's sort of an arcane issue, but opening up the competition, the set-top cable box industry, the Obama administration is hoping to use as an example of all kinds of different policy things where there are mini monopolies or anti-competitive policies that are preventing innovation and are hurting customers.
And so the executive action today by the president was
to ask every agency in the government to go out and look and see if there's other kinds of things. Maybe it's slots at airports going to a wider variety of airlines, or maybe it's cell phone regulations or whatever. Anti-competitive regulations, getting them off the books and allowing more consumers to choose in a free market.
In order to help me and you.
Right?
I hope
so. I'd like to see my cable bill go down.
Me too. I want to get rid of that set-top box. All right, Gregory Korte, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, more fallout from the Planned Parenthood investigation, why the man behind the undercover videos wants his case thrown out. And we'll take you overseas to Lesbos, Greece. See what the Pope will experience when he travels there tomorrow. In a touching tribute, the governor of Massachusetts and the mayor of Boston laid a wreath at the site of the Boston Marathon terrorist attack. It's been 3 years since bombs killed 3 people and injured 264. A moment of silence was held this afternoon at 2:49 p.m. That's the time the first bomb exploded. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. David Daleiden wants a Texas suit against him thrown out of court. His lawyers followed a motion to quash concerns about the evidence and the release of secret grand jury information. Prosecutors indicted the pro-life advocate for his hidden camera investigation into fetal tissue procurement at Planned Parenthood. Daleiden is charged with a felony and misdemeanor. The governor of Tennessee vetoed a bill calling for the Bible to be the state book. The bill narrowly passed both chambers of the General Assembly. Plans to override that veto are underway. And the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem is speaking out about challenges facing Christians in the Holy Land. Archbishop Twal spoke today at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. He says Christians in the Holy Land are greatly outnumbered by Jews and Muslims, but they have to take up their cross just like Jesus.
If he suffered before us in this land, if he died in this land, if he wept on this land, we have to follow his paths, to suffer, to accept the challenges, and to be a good witness for our people. And as we are living between two peoples, Israel from one side, the Muslims from the other side, we are called to be a bridge between these people in conflict, to give example and to stay.
Archbishop Twal says it's hard for him to convince Christians to stay in the Holy Land. He says many leave and immigrate to Central or Latin America. Well, preparations are underway on the Greek island of Lesbos. Pope Francis and Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I arrived this weekend. Leaders of the Catholic Church and Orthodox churches are meeting Saturday to deliver a single message. They stand with the people who have risked death to pursue a brighter future in Europe. Francis and Bartholomew will visit a refugee camp on the island. Hundreds of thousands have passed through it on their trek.
Actually, I hope it will make a difference because he's a respected person. So I think it will be something new for the refugees.
The camp houses migrants slated for deportation under the controversial EU-Turkey plan. It calls for new arrivals in Greece to be returned to Turkey. Father Leo, a Catholic priest in Greece, says it's an historic moment in a divided Europe. He believes if the Orthodox and the Catholic churches, separated for nearly 1,000 years, can cooperate to show solidarity to migrants, so can governments. As a son of immigrants, Francis follows the migration crisis closely.
Pope Francis believes that what Europe is doing is very negative towards migrants, so he's trying to go there and show support.
The Vatican says the Holy Father's 5-hour visit to Lesbos is purely humanitarian and religious in nature, not political. Patrick Nicholson, Director of Communications for Caritas Internationales, joins us now from Lesbos. Welcome to the program. You've helped receive migrants there on the island. What is that experience like?
Well, I mean, it's an extraordinary experience seeing, these tiny little boats coming over the sea, really jam-packed full of people, 50, 60 people on a small dinghy, children, women, pregnant women. It's extraordinary. And when they arrive, they're completely exhausted by their journey. They're terrified by what they've experienced, but they're elated by the hope that now maybe they can put they've got some chance of a better life.
What does the Catholic Church do for the migrants once they arrive on Lesbos?
Well, now I'm standing in the Caritas Hotel, so we take very vulnerable cases, so pregnant women, sick people, handicapped people, people with disabilities, and we look after them until their asylum cases have been processed. As well as that, we provide aid like sleeping bags and blankets.
What's the mood of the people who are there?
Well, the mood in the hotel is good. The people are getting the care they need and the attention they need. I was speaking to one of our staff earlier on today who said that in the detention centers, so the former refugee camps, which have now been turned into detention centers for processing people who arrive straight back to Turkey, things are very tense. People are very unhappy, and they're very concerned about their future, understandably.
Do you expect the Pope's visit to impact the political debate in Europe right now about the migrant crisis?
I mean, that's our hope, that the Pope will bring pressure onto governments, onto European governments, to show that their policies are really impacting very poor and vulnerable families who are fleeing war, fleeing persecution, and really need help.
Patrick Nicholson, Director of Communications for Caritas Internationales, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Up next, family history, how the Holocaust Museum helps Catholics explore their roots too. And marking a milestone, see how they're celebrating the anniversary of Christianity in Poland. Happy birthday to Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. He turns 89 tomorrow. This is a picture of him visiting with Pope Francis last summer. The Vatican says Benedict spends his time praying, reading, and listening to music. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and genealogy website Ancestry.com offer a free online database to track victims and survivors of the Holocaust. Some of the survivors are Catholic, who were also targets of Nazi persecution. Catherine Szeltner used it and is here with her family's personal history.
A new milestone for the World Memory Project. It now features the names of 1 million Nazi victims.
Everyone thinks about the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust, but there are about another 6 million victims who are also perished.
Victims included the mentally ill, political opponents, and Catholics.
Through these records, they can see the actual experiences, what happened to them.
Records containing details about Holocaust and Nazi persecution victims are available for free.
Yes, that's my father. That is my father. Where did you get it?
The Holocaust Memorial Museum welcomes anyone to simply walk in to their resource center to fill in the missing gaps to their family's history during Nazi persecution. Stephen Rizzi has been a top researcher there for 25 years.
It's really this wide open yearning. All they know is that they had family and they don't have them anymore.
It's a yearning that's personal.
It was your grandfather?
It was my grandfather.
My Opa, or grandfather, was born in Hungary in 1927. As a teenager, he was taken to a Russian labor camp before eventually coming to the United States.
Curious. This record is of him right after the war in the displaced persons camp system. And there he is again, last name, first name, his nationality, he's Roman Catholic.
I learned my Opa came to the U.S. alone at age 24. He was offered aid. I even get a peek at his young signature.
I knew nothing about you 15 minutes ago, and now I know almost your whole family story.
My Opa and Oma, or grandmother, knew each other growing up until my Opa was taken away to a labor camp. Today, I discovered they ended up in the same German resettlement camp and came to the U.S. on the same boat just 1 month apart.
Catherine, I have goosebumps. What was this experience like, sitting there to see your family history come alive?
Lauren, it was incredible. I learned a lot more than I expected. Both my Oma and Opa have passed away. My Oma had Alzheimer's, so there have been all these questions I never got to ask, but today I feel like I grew closer to them.
Well, I bet your family is just thrilled that you did this, and I can't wait to hear their reaction. Thank you so much for this beautiful story. Poland celebrates 1,050 years of Christianity in the nation. Today is the second of 3 days of fanfare marking the baptism of Poland's first king in 966. President Duda says it's the most important event in the nation's history. The festivities began yesterday with a mass in western Poland, considered to be the cradle of Catholicism. The Vatican Secretary of State read a message from Pope Francis. Saint Adalbert, a Czech monk, brought Christianity to Poland in the 10th century. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Thank you for watching. We leave you tonight with images of the Pope at daily Mass at the Santa Marta residence where he lives. Good night and God bless.